So how do statues come alive? In our last few videos, we talked about how idols are made and what they're made out of. But we also talked about how a statue is sometimes just a statue. If you don't go through a specific ceremony or a process, an idol doesn't have that power or that connection with a god. In Taiwan, there was an anthropologist who lived with a village for quite a while, and he observed the different ceremonies for their religious worship practices. And one of the things he saw was the opening of the eyes of a god. The first step for the opening of the eyes of the god is to pick what they would call an auspicious day. Auspicious is this word that I see all the time in Taiwan that most Westerners don't really know.
你的鼻子长得很好，很有福气。
But what it means is something that is conducive to success. So maybe if you wanted to catch the right Pokemon, you would go to an auspicious field. So after finding the auspicious grass to catch that Pokemon, we're actually talking about idols. So to find an auspicious day, you might want to pick the birthday of a god, or maybe a very important day to the family that'll have the idol, if it's a house idol, or maybe just a holiday that's really important. Oftentimes they'll even go to a fortune teller to find out this information, or somebody who will be able to tell them what the best day is for the best chance of success. When we say chance of success, that's not saying the idol won't be successful. It's saying how strong will that enshrinement, how strong will that infusing of the god be? Some other things to consider when you wake an idol is also your location. Were to wake an idol up near a tree or a graveyard, there might be a wandering spirit who tried to go into the idol. So there's a lot to consider. And there being hundreds of gods in Taiwan, they're very careful to try and not get the wrong god or the wrong spirit into its idol. So this anthropologist stayed with villagers for a long time and noticed the ceremony had this really interesting aspect where every single idol had a space carved out in it. And inside the idol, they would put beads, different materials, some charms, and a live hornet, which is really scary because if an idol is like 2 or 3 days old, I never want to be around it.
As if COVID-19 weren't enough to worry about, there is now a murderous hornet from Asia here.
But the reason why is the hornet represents the strength or the power of the god. The beads might represent his organs, or it really depended who you would talk to because there's many different beliefs kind of coalescing here. They would take a white rooster and then they would kill the rooster and they would chant while wiping the blood of the rooster on different parts of the idol. So they wipe it along the arm, the leg. In a way, they were kind of drawing the veins of the idol like it was a living being. They take the blood and actually put it on the idol's eyes, and it brings life to it.
Have you awakened?
Yes, I just woke up. I'm the great stone dragon. Good morning!
The idea is that the idol would become the strongest as you made kind of the best combination of the idol's body and the best combination of whatever you put inside the idol. So this whole ceremony is referred to as opening the eyes of the idol. This whole process will be how an idol comes alive. In modern times, they don't always want to use an actual live animal, so sometimes they might use cinnabar or a reddish material and use that to represent it, which is kind of strange because the Taiwanese eat chicken like every single meal, so it feels a little hypocritical there. Now, if you remember what we said earlier, the idol is a conduit from the spiritual to the physical world. And there's a lot more to these ceremonies. They can get pretty elaborate, including firewalking or representing firewalking. They can have an actual sort of spirit army that is raised to be part of the idol's retinue. So there's a lot involved, but the biggest thing to know is that you have this vessel and you have this means to connect the physical and the spiritual world. Compare and contrast time, woo! So there's an amazing similarity actually between Taiwanese folk religion and how they have an idol come alive, and how Christianity actually talks about Christians and how Christians come alive. So in Christianity, we have the perfect vessel. If you're made in the image of God, which all humans are, then your physical vessel is good enough for God to dwell in you. But every single vessel has this problem, and that's the inside is not good enough. It's not pure. And just like we see in Taiwanese folk religion, where an idol needs a white rooster and its blood, there's actually a very similar thing happened in Christianity. So thousands of years ago, when you were Jewish, if there was sin, they would once a year, they'd go and they'd sacrifice, and the blood of those sacrifices would actually cover up the sin of the people of Israel. So the idea of purification is that the blood would actually pay for something like impurity. Christianity is actually considered by Christians the fulfillment of Judaism. So we actually use the old sacred Jewish texts, the Old Testament, and we have new texts called the New Testament. And we believe that the picture in the Old Testament of sacrifice was actually a picture to come of Jesus Christ. And it's a really beautiful thing for us. Years later, God would send his own son, Jesus Christ, and he would actually be the sacrifice for the entire nation of Israel and the world. To get the Spirit of God in us, to get our connection between the spiritual and the physical, it takes blood and it takes being purified. So God sent his son, and his son paid with his own life. And so this blood was able to basically pay the fee to purify any single person. So one of the things that's different is that in Taiwanese folk religion, there's many, many gods and many, many spirits. And there's this level of having to work really, really hard to make that perfect vessel, and having that perfect worship, and having that perfect connection. And even then, you're not really assured that's going to be the best connection. That's why you have an auspicious day, that it's conducive to success. The reason that a Taiwanese person would go through all this effort to build a conduit between his God and the physical world is because that's a very practical thing for them. In the temple, they would go there if they're sick and they would get healing. And if they wanted advice, they'd go there. If they want to get blessing, and there's a relationship there that is in some ways very transactional. With Christianity, the thing that's really different is that we don't believe we have to go through all this effort to make a specific idol, but that you can actually be a conduit to have the God of the universe connected with you. You could have the Holy Spirit of God in you. Now, what's interesting is to actually have that process happen doesn't take a lot of work, but it does take faith, and it takes asking for forgiveness from God. It takes accepting what God's gift is sacrifice of the blood to be over our body and make us come alive. And there's some incredible things that we believe that has. And that connection with God is not just to get something out of it, but it's a beautiful relationship. Like having a best friend who's always with you, who is the God of the universe. And so in some ways there's a lot of similarity, but the way that Christianity works is very personal and very individualistic, in that anyone can be a conduit for God. So we find that pretty amazing. Any person can have a relationship with the God of the universe. They only need to ask him into their lives to purify them. And we'll talk even more about that process in future videos in depth, and why Jesus Christ was the way to do that. So we hope you've learned a lot through our idol series, and we're going to continue in our next video to talk a little bit about the why behind some of these ideas, because we know what idols are, we know how they're made, we know how the spirit of a god goes into an idol, but why? Why does that matter? So if you've been watching our videos so far, we hope you've enjoyed learning about these subjects, but we'd also love to interact with you. If you have questions, reach out to us. We'd love to get deeper on these subjects. And also, if you have thoughts about different videos you'd want us to cover, if you start sending us questions or thoughts our way, we can kind of make content that helps you figure out maybe different aspects of missionary life or Taiwanese folk religion or Christianity. So please like, subscribe, and ring that bell, and we'll see you again next week.
Personally,
I wasn't saying it was a joke.
I will
It just came from the soul.
cut